You've entered the boss room. I'm Kabas. I've run Draw Steel twice a week since January 2025. My intent here is to hone your battlecraft maps, specifically for Draw Steel adventures, from the perspective of the one pulling the strings, the director. So why maps? It's a tactical game. You play on a grid, unless you don't, but I think that's really the strength of Draw Steel, playing on the grid. Um, I'm a combat junkie, and I've got players that are towards the optimized side for sure. And I play almost exclusively digitally, so some of these things you might need to modify if you play in person, but I think they're still plenty applicable. Now, I've got so you've got maps and you've got height on this two-dimensional map. You've got but it's three-dimensional when you play the game, and so I've struggled with this. I don't know if other people have. So I made a diagram one day, and I can link it somewhere. But you've got cube 0, cube 1, cube 2, cube 3, and at the bottom of cube 0 is the floor that everyone stands on, and then the top of cube 0 would be 5 feet into the air, hypothetically, even though most people are taller than that, probably in the game. Then you've got cube 1, which is, what some people might call height 2, and then cube 2, and then cube 3. And at the top of cube 3 is a ceiling in this diagram. And so when an adventurer says the ceiling is 4 squares high, that is how I interpret the ceiling being 4 squares high, is cube 0, cube 1, cube 2, cube 3, with the ceiling being up here and the floor being down at the bottom of cube 0. So the bottom face of cube 0 is the floor, and the top face of cube 3 is the ceiling. That's how I interpret it. It could be wrong, but it helps me stay consistent. Now, let's get to more interesting things. What do we put in maps? And I'd say that height is important. That's why I was talking about a diagram for it. And specifically, a height change of like 3 squares in height is usually what I go for, because people want to make things fall down and take damage and go prone. And you as a director want to do the same. And also, just flat maps are kind of boring. So people want high ground edges, they want to climb things, or you want to fly over things, or stay out of reach of something. Height can do that for you. Additionally, sources of concealment, more than one, preferably, or cover, or something. Concealment is generally easier to stick into a map than cover, because cover generally involves walls or objects or something. And if you have a map you want to use, but you don't want to stick something in there, then it's easier to find a way to just say, oh, there's a brush here, or some haze in the area that conceals this part, so on and so forth. Look out for your shadow players, because they're going to ask, is there anywhere I can hide? And if you tell them no, they're going to be sad and sigh, and that's just how it's going to go for a lot of maps in default adventures, because they don't have concealment. Have concealment somewhere, have cover somewhere, have a height change. But if you take anything from this video or podcast or wherever you're experiencing it, have a height change, have concealment. Those are the big takeaways. If you take nothing else, take those. Which brings me to, what is concealment? Because sure, shadows need it to hide and such, but like, what is it? So concealment is when something obscures a creature's form, but does not protect their form, making them harder to target. So you can target an invisible creature, or a creature inside a smoke cloud, or a creature under dense foliage, but strikes against them will take a bane, which is kind of interesting, because that means grabs and knockbacks won't by default have a bane against them. What this does allow is that area abilities, bursts, 3 cubes, things like that, those do not take a bane from concealment, which makes sense, which is convenient. It's just up to you as the director to determine to determine, do grabs take a bane? Do knockbacks take a bane? Do other abilities that target without being a strike take a bane? Things like that. And then cover. So when you have line of effect to a creature, or something, object even, but that target has at least half their form blocked by a solid obstruction, then you take a bane on damage dealing abilities. So now we're covering strikes and area abilities, bursts, cubes, things like that, lines. But still, knockbacks and grabs are not necessarily taking a bane when something has cover, which, I mean, I could make sense of, or you could say they have a bane. Just really depends on the situation. And then finally, since we're talking about concealment and shadows, we might as well talk about the hidden condition. So when you use a high maneuver during combat, you just become hidden, no test involved, if you have concealment or cover from a creature who isn't observing you. The trick is whether the creature observed you or not. So a creature is observing you if they're aware of your specific location and can point out with a finger or a paw or a tentacle, whatever it is, to the hero and say, there you are. And that's tricky because now you have to figure out if things are observing you, and you can be hidden from some creatures but not others because this creature observed you and that creature did not. So how do we determine what's going on here? Some people like to say you need 2 degrees of separation, so like a wall between you and concealment, so that they couldn't have observed you, or one source of concealment here and then another that you hide in, so that there's 2 degrees of separation that way. And you can do that, and it works. It's just it takes some time to think of. Or if you're not sure, you could have them make a test. I mean, shadows are default can have the hide and sneak skills, but how often they get to use them in combat is entirely up to you, because you just default become hidden, or you can't become hidden if they're observed, unless they're using a feature like defensive roll or smoke bomb or black hash teleport or things like that. But other people, when they're going to try and hide, they need to fit to the observed or not observed traditions. So knowing when something is observed, and knowing when something is hidden, what's hidden, are all important elements here. Maps. Okay. So in addition to having a map, having cover, having concealment, things happen on the map. It's a dramatic game, and I posit that you need either an objective or a point you are willing to yield an encounter as a director, unless you're running a solo. And that's basically the only time I think it's best to let everything on the map, one side or another, drain to 0 stamina. Because draw steal is not about attrition. It's about high stakes and narrative weight. So there was one time I was playing a map, and instead of simply killing a hero, because I had the chance, I had multiple chances, I had my zombie grab them and then move them over to a spike pit and dangle them over it. And then it was up to the heroes after that to rescue them and figure out a way, because the zombie was crumbling to ash because of an arena effect. And their job was to rescue that hero before they were dropped into the pit from the crumbling hand of the zombie and definitively die. And they managed to do so. But if they had died, the player and I agreed that death would have been far more dramatic than the zombie just walking up and bopping them on the head. So, I got lost somewhere in there, but objectives are important. Right, because you can diminish everyone's stamina to 0, and that works, and it's a viable tactic. It's just it takes more time. So let's talk about the objectives. I'm not sure I covered all of them here, but diminish numbers. So set a point you're willing to yield at, whether it's the heroes outnumber the creatures 2 to 1, or if there's no non-minions left on the map, or some other point. That'll save you a lot of time, and you can get through more encounters that way. But depending on your table, you might only get through one encounter a day, and maybe you want to have all the heroes take all their turns they can. In that case, I've been in tables like that, and I still prefer that the director yields the encounter early, because I want to progress the adventure. But some people are only playing draw steel once a month or once every other month or something like that. So maybe they want to take all their turns, and that's completely cool. Depends on your table. You know it better than I do. Then we have defeat specific foe, which is cool because it incentivizes a different way of strategizing. You've got one target who's presumably got a lot more stamina than the others, and they're in a certain position on the map. And now heroes know they can end the encounter if they just get rid of this one thing. And so they're willing to take more risks and position in ways that are very different from how they usually would if they're just diminishing numbers or eliminating everything on the map, which I enjoy. Up to a point. There's some shenanigans that my players get up to where I didn't play in an encounter, and it was cool to listen to them plan, but I didn't take a turn in that combat, and that's just how it goes in Draw Steel sometimes, because heroes are powerful and monsters wait to take a turn sometimes, even when they win initiative. But I like listening to them plan, and I can figure out ways to move past the situation if it gets annoying. But for now, it's cool to listen to them plan. Escort. There are escort missions. I've done precisely one when I ran Aestus RPG's The Curse. Shout out to Aestus. You had cover and concealment on your map, probably because the enemies had features that took advantage of such a thing. But you gotta look out for your heroes too. They have features and abilities that want to use concealment and cover. But good job to Aestus. You had elevation changes, you had cover, you had concealment. They were all present on all the maps I can remember. Yes. All right. Diminished numbers, defeat specific foe, get the thing. Probably my favorite objective. This game has movement, and some features and abilities are specifically dedicated to just moving through things or around things. You've got people that can walk through stone. You've got people that can fly right from level 1. Furies and Gnolls are going to start jumping really crazy distances. The Void Elementalists teleport people. They teleport people all the time. And any Elementalist can take no more than a breeze to become ethereal and just walk through things. Which I think is super cool to have at low level. First level. So let them use their cool movement. Again, the game is not about attrition. So if they just breeze through an encounter because they have the right tools to do so, cool. Victory for them. Let them celebrate. Move on to the next one. It's okay. At least that's how I view it, because I think it's wonderful that they have all these cool movement features. I had a dragon guarding a specific stone that heroes needed, and between a chronopathy talent and Vulcan, whatever it's pronounced, Storm White Fury. I think the guy moves something like 30 squares in a round. And, this dragon was going to maybe not destroy them, but certainly give them a very difficult time, and I don't think they would have killed it. But they managed to grab the stone from right next to it and then extract from the area pretty successfully. And that was cool. I liked it. It was a very satisfying encounter, even though the dragon didn't really do much. And dragons are cool, but players also get to be cool, and that's totally fine. Escort. I think I got really sidetracked there. The Curse has an escort mission. It also emphasizes movement in a different way from Get the Thing. And in Get the Thing, I like to have the object guarded by hazards, seen or unseen, and have the object be hidden sometimes. I don't really like it on an enemy, because then you kind of make the objective defeat specific foe again, which is not what I'm looking for. But yeah, Get the thing is one way to encourage movement. Escort is another, because you can grab the ward or force move them around. They also get a turn to move. Um, but I just don't have very much experience on that objective type, so more input later when I run it again, I guess. Hold them off is a fantastic objective if you have a lot of time, because it takes a lot of time. Reinforcements come in every new round, and they grow linearly with how much the heroes have eliminated from the map. I think it's fantastic for a castle siege, which is exactly how I use the objective. It's fun to use the siege engines, catapults. Trebuchets, by the way, are the superior siege engine, but not in the game because I guess catapults are more iconic. Boohoo, I cry river. Yeah, hold them off is great if you have a lot of time, but be prepared to spend a lot of time on it. Assault the defenses is also a very cool objective, probably my second favorite behind Get the Thing. Um, you need to get to a position on the map and exclude enemies from the position and then hold it for like 3 turns in a row, 4 turns in a row, something like that. You can bump it up or down. And it works really well. I like it. I should use it more often, but yeah, I've had very pleasant experiences with it every time I ran it. Um, and this is once again a way to get your heroes to move out of their kind of defensive shell that they usually set every map. Because you can get a lot more encounter budget if you have an assault the defenses map, but it can be easier in difficulty depending on how you set up the assault the defenses map. So you can harass them with a lot more incoming damage, but the encounter can end a lot faster, and they don't have to burn through all the enemy stamina because they have secured the position, which is nice. It's a very cool objective, and I should use it more. Stop the action is every time I've run it has felt like a diminish numbers or defeat specific foe or just destroy the thing kind of map. And destroy the thing gets a little wonky because the stamina you can set for the object, if you make it durable, it's impossible to destroy in a timely manner. And so then you've switched the objective from destroy the thing to destroy all monsters, which is whatever. I made that mistake. Now you don't have to make it. Maybe you could fine tune the numbers a little bit. I don't like tuning numbers. I'd rather trust the people that made the game, and so I just don't use that objective because it takes way too long to destroy a durable enhanced object in Destroy the Thing. And similarly, stop the action. I have not yet found a way to finesse it in a way that doesn't just feel like defeat specific foe or diminish numbers. You got your cultists around their ritual circle, or someone is lighting a bomb, or maybe the bomb's already set and it's counting down. Maybe that could be a good stop the action kind of encounter. But alas, even with 2 games a week for 6 months now, I have not run that type of encounter. Make objectives known to your players, because you can have a great objective and set it up well, but if you don't have a big old reminder or verbal reminder to the players, they're just going to assume, like they should, that they need to diminish enemy numbers. So I use Rule 20, and I just have in big text, although sometimes it's not big enough. Like just last week, my players didn't know the objective of a map, but defeat specific foe, or hold them off, or hold specific area for 3 turns consecutively, that kind of thing. Yeah, and then objectives, dynamic terrain objects. Use them; they're fun. I like them a lot. And when you've got spare encounter value in your budget, I'll probably talk about that some other time if I make another one of these. If you've got 50 points and the heroes take up 40, but you don't have a creature that takes 10 or less than 10, or some, or maybe you do have something that takes less than 10. You can still fill out those, last few points um, with objects. Have a spike pit, have a tripwire that sets off an alarm, have something. Because you can have these dangerous dungeon feels to a dungeon room or any area, frankly, if you include pressure plates and tripwires. Those are just some of my signature favorite go-tos. It makes players feel silly for walking in a straight line, which you should discourage them from doing so because the game has lots of movement. You can jump, you can climb, you can fly, you can teleport. If you walk in a straight line, I'm gonna punish you. Um, yes. So pit traps are cool. Pressure plates, tripwires. Pavis shields are also cool. You can make a creature more durable and give them cover at the cost of some of their speed. I've used those sometimes. I should get back to using them. And just encounters in general make for different tactical situations, which is great because just diminishing numbers. While Draw Steel has awesome combat, I prefer to engage in different types of combats, so that's what objectives are for. Furthermore, just because you set a hazard doesn't mean it's going to be used against the players. It could be used against the enemies once they discover it. Someone falls in the pit and they're like, oh, wait a minute, we can shove this big guy into the pit, and then he has to climb out while he's prone, and that takes him a turn. That takes him 2 turns. And then we slow him, and then he's just out of the encounter without, diminishing his 80 stamina. That's cool. That's tactical. Yeah. And then we've got, uh, again, maps for heroes. So, your heroes have these features. They've got Black Cash Teleport, they've got Defensive Roll, they've got Smoke Bomb. Let them use their features. Make sure to have, again, cover, concealment, height change. People might have a climb speed, or climb speed. We don't have that anymore. A feature that lets them climb as if moving at full movement or something like that. A swim speed. Water combats are doable in Draw Steel. They don't get really confusing like in other systems that I've tried. Water is simple. It slows down your movement. You take a Bane on any power roll while you're in there, and you have Lightning Weakness 5 and Fire Immunity 5. And Lightning Weakness 5 is something the players love to capitalize on. A quick zap from an Elementalist using Practical Magic. Lots of Fury features that somehow sneak in lightning damage, and other people might build a weapon, or they have a Thunderhead Cloud or something like that. There are many sources of lightning damage, and people will find a way to dump enemies into water and zap them, and it's fun. It's fun. I like it. So, yeah. Don't let your shadow players cry about not having anywhere to hide. Clarify features on your map. Use different colors. If you have a digital map and you have that luxury. I'll write +0 to annotate elevation in big green, and I'll use +1 for yellow, +1 in yellow for higher elevation, +3 in orange, +6 in cyan or bright blue. And then all the negative elevation below 0, I just write in red because generally players go up the map and not down, and all they want to know is, is that elevation downwards, and if so, how far down? And that's why I just use red. And I think that's it. I thought I was going to be talking for a longer time, but I have covered what I wanted to say, and I guess I can make more because there's more I want to talk about, but I just didn't write it down. So until next time.